Hello and welcome to the 13th of Friday. I'm your host, Tyler Gardner, joined by my co-host, as always, Grayson Turner.
Hey, glad to be here.
So, you know the premise of this podcast already if you're listening to this. We're going back and watching the Nightmare on Elm Street movies for the first time in the reverse order. Both of us horror newbies. And so obviously, last time we did one of these, we started with the seventh film in the franchise, Wes Craven's New Nightmare, which we both, I think, really enjoyed. Even 6 months later, I think you and I both have positive thoughts on it. Now,
So,
we definitely fucked up on this one because while we should have watched the sixth movie in the franchise, which I believe is called The Final Nightmare, looking at HBO, they're missing the fourth film or the third film. They're missing one of them in the middle.
fourth, yeah, they're missing the fourth.
And so, as I was looking through, I just assumed that Nightmare on Elm Street 5 was what we needed to watch, and that Final Nightmare, because it's not numbered, was the fourth movie. That is not the case. So we've already have this horrible order of watching these, and somehow we've managed to make it even worse, because now we've just skipped one arbitrarily, which we will go back to. But for now, we're watching the fifth movie. I feel like the best place to start with this is just to kind of give a brief summary for those listening who, like us, had not seen this. Where would you start with this movie, Grayson?
Oh boy. Well, I would first start with the effects, honestly. I mean, even though we're summarizing it, I feel like the plot is honestly secondary to this movie.
Yeah,
Really,
yeah, you're right. You're right.
the plot was like an afterthought. The effects were amazing. I enjoyed the movie thoroughly, but the plot itself was quite bad. I think it was an afterthought. It really was not that great. It was kind of all over the place. In the end, Freddy killed some people, and Freddy got defeated, as in, I'm assuming, the rest of the movies that we're going to be watching.
Happens also, yeah. I'm sure that's a staple. Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of the movie itself, like, what's really important is, it's some kids graduating high school. The protagonist, she ends up getting pregnant from her boyfriend, who's killed by Freddy, and slowly their other friends are also getting killed. And as it turns out, the baby that she is going to have is sort of being, I don't know, corrupted by Freddy or taken over.
The baby's dreams are being invaded by Freddy.
Yes, which is a thing
Which is crazy.
Don't think actually happens. Not Freddy invading people's babies' dreams, but babies dreaming like that. Yeah, he's taking over the baby's dreams to sort of get into the real world. And so, yeah, he's just slowly killing off Alice's friends and trying to, I assume, not kill her. I assume have the baby and then kill her.
It was also weird. I think you mentioned that while you were watching it, is he really acts like he's going to kill her, and he starts killing off her friends one by one, but what's the point of this if he's living in her baby? If he kills her,
yeah, then...
I'm no doctor, but her baby was not that far along enough to be saved from this whole process if she dies. So,
well, also,
I don't know what he was thinking.
Not made clear how far along this pregnancy is.
No, not at all.
The first
she had no noticeable bump at all or anything.
No, well, in the first movie, in the scene is a sex scene, presumably when she's conceiving this baby.
The worst sex scene I've ever seen.
Really bad.
It was very close up. Nothing was clear. It was very much like a PG-13 sort of sex scene.
Despite the fact that the movie is rated R, which is very straight. But yeah, the assumption was that scene took place like right as the movie was starting. But then everything that's going on implies that like she's quite far along in the pregnancy. It seemed like maybe it was unclear. I would say not made apparent.
Yes.
So yeah, I would say our primary characters are Alice, who's our lead, Jacob, who is her unborn child. There's Yvonne, Yvonne, Mark, and Greta are her friends, and then Dan is her boyfriend, and then Amanda is Freddy Krueger's mother, who was a nun and killed herself, and they're trying to find her body so that she can help defeat Freddy.
Her body and her soul. Everything about this was, again, the plot was very half-baked.
No, you're right. The secondary to just how wacky visually this movie was. Mm-hmm. I think we'll get to some of that in the kills, but like outside of that, when people were dying, were there any things that really like stood out to you from a visual standpoint?
Oh man, I could talk the entire podcast about Mark's death. I mean, throughout the entire movie, you see him drawing comic book characters, you see him sketching. He even gets yelled at one point by Alice for doing that while she's trying to have a heart-to-heart with the friend group. And his death was, I mean, it's almost hard to explain, but man, I'm honestly kind of at a loss for words here. They really did just an amazing job of transporting him visually into his comic books temporarily, having him become his character, and then when Freddy overpowers and kills him, turning him into like a piece of comic book paper.
Like a flat Stanley. He turns into a flat
the color
Stanley.
is literally drained out of him. It was just such an amazing effect.
Yeah, it looked
and
great.
It looked very good, especially for 1989. I mean, you could put it today, and I'd be like, wow, it's a really good practical effect. But it was 1989. I mean, we're talking 33 years ago.
Yeah, well, and they also did the Pleasantville effect in the comic book where Mark was in color, and everything else was in black and white, except for eventually like some blood.
See, I was thinking about that. I honestly don't even know if they did the effect for that, or if they just really had a monochromatic set and then a few brown like boxes snuck in there. I think
I guess it's tough. Yeah, maybe they did. I mean, because I guess you pretty easily could have just had Freddy, the actor Robert Englund, just in some makeup that was grayscale.
Like, the budget for this movie was $8 million, I believe.
Yeah, you're right. They didn't have the money for the Pleasantville effect like 15 years early. No way. Even for a little 3-minute scene, they couldn't do it.
No, there's no way.
But with a little basic plot down the way, I mean, what did you think of it on the whole, just in terms of it being a movie, and also kind of your thoughts about like what you like best about it, and maybe what you didn't like so much?
Well, as you can tell, I loved the effects. I mean, again, the effects. This might actually be one of my favorite movies that I've seen visually.
It was
maybe
very
ever,
surreal.
Honestly, I mean, honestly, they really just did a good job with the limited budget. The practical effects were amazing. They CGI'd a few things you could tell that were kind of not great. There was a spider effect that we thought was quite bad. But honestly, everything else I really couldn't complain about, especially in the diner where when Dan is dying, Alice has this waking nightmare of his death. And it was kind of just sudden where the background drops out and he's in like this weird hell vortex. But it was very sudden. It was very well done. And I thought it was very stunning, the background of just the diner warping into that. So I've talked a lot about the effects. The effects were amazing. The plot was pretty trash. I mean, I think it was. Yeah. To call it average, I think is a disservice. It was pretty bad. I mean,
I definitely think New Nightmare's plot was stronger, just in terms of like it being interesting and kind of weird. Whereas this seemed very, underbaked.
Yeah, I was disappointed every time they weren't in some sort of dream scenario, to be honest, because that's where the movie was the strongest, which makes sense. It's a horror movie. They're not known for amazing plots or anything, or great writing. And a lot of it's funny, some of the dialogue was actually quite good. There were a few times where Freddy would say a line, or someone would say a line, which is funny, in like a cheeky sort of campy way. Mm-hmm. But then other times, there would just be a line that you would just feel like was horror. It was like George Lucas wrote it. It was just awful. It was like
it's
just miserable.
Line.
And you'd be like, well, that wasn't good. But I think most of the lines, especially in the dream sequences, again, where the movie really shines, were actually quite good. And it really did play to its strengths. I thought actually an hour and a half, speaking of the length, was perfect for this, because you got in all these great, unique visual effects. You didn't really double dip on a lot of them, which I appreciated too. It really felt like they got the whole suite of effects that they had. They got to use them each a couple times, maybe once or twice, and then it was done. Then the movie was done, and because the movie was shorter, the plot didn't even feel that important. I mean, the plot was quite garbage. Well, you're freeing Amanda's soul from this asylum while you're fighting. It was awful.
You're right. Like when it's not, movies are too long. Like when it's not 2 hours, the plot doesn't really. The fact that it's kind of weaker doesn't matter because it's over so fast. You could just kind of enjoy the ride without thinking too hard about it.
I did feel some things were rushed because of it, especially Yvonne really starts off as the skeptic character. I mean, she is just really mean to her friend who loses her boyfriend.
She's a piece of shit. Briefly.
Honestly, she was at the beginning of the movie, she was a piece of shit. I mean, really. And then she has one dream sequence and completely understands. And also, there's just a lot unexplained. Actually, I mentioned this in my little write-up that I did for this too. Like, there's a lot unexplained, which I think is probably in the movies that we're going to watch next.
Yeah, I was going to say. Or after this now, maybe.
Yeah. I do think they actually did a fairly decent job of providing background for Freddy, though, within the movie. I feel like this actually was a movie that you could pick up and maybe just watch. In fact, this is the kind of thing I might suggest to a friend of mine who hasn't seen any of these movies, just because I like the effects so much, and I think it's enjoyable just for that to watch and sit down and be like, wow, It's just a very visually appealing film, you know?
Yeah, I mean, they did give us in the middle a little rundown of like, as she's explaining to her friends, hey, here's who Freddy is, here's how he got created. His mother was sexually assaulted, working at this asylum, gave birth to Freddy. She then kills herself, and then Freddy ends up killing kids, getting off on some sort of technicality.
Yeah, which
was not explained. Yeah, and then the parents of the murdered children seemingly burned Freddy or roasted him. Or she uses some weird phrase to describe it. And now he comes back to continually kill the kids of Elm Street. So like it was like, okay, at least that's our basic why this is happening now. We do kind of have that.
Which actually I think worth mentioning too is I really actually kind of like the characters in the movie. I really think there's a lot of horror movies and movies in general where the characters are just kind of not great people.
Yeah.
But I honestly, you know, like think about like Mark, who again, best death in the movie, best death I've seen in a movie in a long time, is very supportive of Alice. You know, he's like, listen, baby's causing a lot of problems. Maybe you shouldn't keep it. And Alice is like, I'm going to keep the baby. And then Mark's like, okay, cool, we'll find a different way.
Yeah,
you know?
very positive, like, male friendship in a movie.
Yeah, like just platonic friendship between friends of the opposite sex. Like,
yeah, he's not trying to, like, hit on her.
Her character too. Yeah, he's not trying to be like, maybe we should, you know, he's not trying to, like, make a move on her or anything. No. He's just like, listen, we need to solve this problem. We're both in danger. You're in danger. Your baby's in danger. Let's fix this. And her dad, also very supportive. Her dad, I think, throughout the movie, just does a good job of, like, being the protective parent and just being, like, a positive figure who you're like, you never felt like he was a detriment to the plot or Alice or really any of it.
No, yeah, well, how often is, like, the dad in a movie just, like, a dick? You know, just, like...
Oh, so much. And he might be an alcoholic.
They did mention that, but we didn't... That actually wasn't relevant to the plot at all.
No, that wasn't relevant
at all. It never came
up. Maybe in number 4 it is.
I think my favorite scene with her dad was when her dead boyfriend's parents come over and are like, "Hey, you should have the baby, and then we'll adopt him and raise him because you're not fit for this because you're going crazy." And she's like, "I'm not gonna let you do that." And Dan's parents are just like, "Oh yeah, your doctor called us and told us you're neurotic now, and we can sue you, and the court will side with us." It's like, no, they won't. And the dad's just like, "Get out of here! Like, what? What are you doing here? This is not legal advice."
He really stands up for Alice. I actually, weirdly enough, I think you and I also mentioned this. Every part of this movie takes place of like 3 or 4 days.
Yeah,
it's a very short period of time.
Yeah.
Like, Dan dies, and then 2 days later, his parents are fighting for the custody of their unborn grandchild before they've even probably buried him. I mean, burials don't happen in 2 days. Like, what?
Yeah.
You know what?
Greta dies the day in between. Mark dies the next day. Like, yeah, this is like 4 days of multiple murders.
It wasn't even a whole week. This was not even a whole week. There's 3 deaths. Now, I don't count Freddy as in like an actual death that the police would care about, but like, you know what I mean? I think that the movie being an hour and a half also probably helped with all of the weird time constraints too.
No, it was probably written fairly quickly, which I'm sure made it just sort of, you know, shortened up. Like when you looked it up, the prior movie was a year before, so it's not like that a ton
88
of time
to 89.
like,
I mean, they quick turnaround.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing for me about this was just like, I kind of just get slashers now, like that genre. It is just fun in a way to see, particularly Freddy here, because he's just so weird. You know, he's just a weirdo. It's just fun to see him cause mayhem and mess with people, and like the bizarre ways he's going to torment them. It is a strangely fun experience, where you're just kind of like literally, 5 minutes into the movie, they're all hanging out at this pool in their high school, and I was like, oh, I wonder if we're gonna see somebody get killed in this pool, and we don't quite see it, but he does attack somebody at the pool, and it's like, yeah, I was waiting for this the whole time. I was waiting for the pool scene, and so it's just a fun type of movie. So I kind of just get it now.
Yeah, I mean, this really, it's funny watching these. You know, we're definitely not big horror guys. This is really like the 3rd horror movie I've seen. You know. And I'm honestly really enjoying this whole slasher sort of thing.
Well, I was going to say, wait until we get to one that's like genuinely horrifying. Is the problem.
Yeah, I will not enjoy that nearly as much, if at all.
The one thing I feel like we do have to, before we kind of move on from just our thoughts, is like Freddy's power level. I feel like we mentioned this last time too, that like he really didn't kill that many people. You know, he had a lot of opportunities to kill the lead in the last movie that he just didn't take. And I feel like Freddy is just a very weak villain, bizarrely.
He's not strong. He is not strong.
Like in his own realm, in his own domain of people's dreams, he's easily injured and easily like held back or trapped or locked behind stuff briefly. Like he just doesn't seem to have any power in his own world. That it's almost a miracle that he managed to kill even 3 people in this movie.
Yeah, I mean, there were several scenes where they're in a dream sequence in his sort of nightmare realm, and she just like assaults him, like
yeah, just like hits
it's
him.
your own
or...
plane.
Yeah, I don't
beats
understand.
his ass.
I don't understand how he's just unable to simply defeat the heroes, right? Like, I get it's a movie, there's got to be tension, but like the fact that his own world he's so weak in is very unique. But I don't know, maybe it's just because he's not super concerned with killing them, right? Like he's just having a good time being a weirdo who's like serving up food and, you know, being a baby. Killing them is maybe not the priority as much as him just having a good old time.
I really think Freddy might have the best time of any villain, maybe any movie character I've ever seen, honestly. He really just like dicks around, trolls the people, murders a few here and there. I mean,
he's just eating it up. Like, and props to Robert Englund, who I can't say I was really familiar with before watching these, but like he's clearly just having a good time doing this.
There's a few characters I think across all cinema who just, you know, like Robert Englund made his career I think off of Freddy Krueger, and a lot of other. He's definitely one of the most. I honestly might say one of the most talented people I've seen do that. I mean, he just really has a lot of charisma and just clearly enjoys what he's doing the whole time.
Well, and it keeps it in that realm of like camp that doesn't feel cheesy, you know, where like he's not faking it. He's not like. I mean, there is some overacting in that, just it's so over the top, but like it doesn't feel like bad acting to get there. It feels like he is genuinely putting in a really good performance and like having a good time, despite his fairly limited presence in the movie itself.
I mean, yeah, it didn't feel like he was phoning it in at all.
No, yeah, for sure. Well, now I think we should just move on to. Can I call this an iconic part of our podcast? I feel like this is iconic. What do we think is going to have already happened?
I mean, this is the whole point we do this, right?
Yeah, right? Like, what do we think happened before this? I have some thoughts. I'm sure you do, too. So,
yeah, you want to start us off?
Yeah, sure. So, obviously, I'm going to do this just discounting the 6th movie, because now that's after this and in between. So, focusing on 1 through 4. Clearly, Alice and Dan have some kind of, you know, history with Freddy, because he was pretty much like, oh, this is happening again. Like, okay, we gotta figure this out. So I'm assuming that in the 4th movie, maybe even the 3rd movie, they encounter Freddy, and probably is when Dan and Alice kind of meet and hook up and become an item. But the one thing that I am kind of confused about is how none of their friends know about this, which makes me think whatever murders Freddy's doing in the prior film must just not be related to their school at all, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Or else everyone would be like, oh yeah, remember that time a year ago when like 4 kids at our high school died? You'd think they'd you'd think they'd believe Alice right away when she's like, yeah, the thing that killed all those kids last time is just doing this again. Yeah. So maybe it's like, I don't know, maybe they go to like a summer camp or something. Like they meet at some camp where they're away from everybody. Because I really can't think of what else would put them outside the town while still meeting each other and dealing with Freddy. So summer camp, that's my guess.
You had way more thoughts on this than I did. I honestly think the plot for 4 is probably not even that developed. I really think it's probably just your generic slasher flick. There's some girls, there's some guys, there's probably some weird sex scene, you know? It's just like some teenagers doing teenager stuff and they get killed one by one. I also think Freddy definitely gets defeated in 4. because Alice was really surprised that he was back,
Yeah,
and even more
for sure.
surprised that he was able to affect her when she was not sleeping. So I think it's got to be. I think maybe
the
we
rules are
entered at the
more
point-
set in stone.
yeah,
At that
that's
point.
exactly what I was going to say. I really think we entered at a point where the writers were getting a little bit stale of the when someone's sleeping, that's when things happen. They were like, you know what, fuck it. Well, you know what, there's a baby. The baby's dreaming. That's when stuff's gonna happen.
Yeah. Well, you can tell that like what's interesting, I guess, about his powers is like it does sort of prey on your vulnerability. Like you can't sleep because if you sleep, he can get you, and so you have to stay up, which then makes you delirious and makes you not, acting at 100%, which then eventually you have to sleep, and now you're even more weak and not ready to fight him. And so I think this was taking that same idea of like she's pregnant, like, and she wants to have the baby, so this is something that she can't control in a way. It's also out of her hands. So if there is any sort of like Freddy, messing around with stuff in reality, I think it would be in that same kind of like way where you're vulnerable, where it's like you're in a, maybe you're not dreaming, but I literally can't think of anything off the top of my head, but some aspect of your life that you just aren't in control of, and that he's able to get in through that, because he definitely seems to prey on like vulnerability. And now I think that leads us to, speaking of him preying on vulnerability, ranking the kills.
Oh yes.
Which I feel like we should start at the worst one.
Yeah.
And work our way up, because
I think we had a consensus.
Yeah, I think
for
we
this episode.
literally did the same. So do you want to start with the bottom one here?
Yeah, I think the worst by far was Freddy. I think I say by far, it wasn't actually that far behind number 3, and I honestly don't think any of the kills in the movie that were that bad. I really don't think it was that bad. I just think that 1 and 2 were very clearly the best two, and number 1 was the best by far.
Yeah.
That 3 and 4 almost seemed bad by comparison, although they weren't uninteresting. I did enjoy both of them. Freddy's death is just kind of bland compared to the other ones in the movie.
And to be fair, he didn't exactly die, I would say.
Yeah, he didn't really die.
He just
I guess
got kind of
that's the tough thing.
Like exorcised. I don't like I don't. Spirits were pulled out of his body, and then he got locked behind a door. And there was some neat visual stuff going on with him being pulled back with the spirits of his 3 victims kind of like coming out of him. It was definitely like an interesting practical effect, but I do think compared to the last movie we watched, it was disappointing in comparison, because Freddy's death in that oven was quite exciting, I think.
Yeah, turning into Satan, burning up.
Yeah, literally
pretty hard
turning
to
into Satan. So this was a little weak by comparison. And then, yeah, in third place, I think we both had Greta, who is she's like a model, right? Her parents were like forcing her to be a model and to get her beauty sleep and eat healthy.
I wish that was fleshed out more, because I thought that was an interesting plot line. She had those interesting scenes with the dolls. I don't know, I didn't really mind that.
Yeah, she had a lot of dolls in her bedroom, some weird, creepy little doll things. And then, yeah, she's at the dinner table, and there's all these guests over, and I don't know, Freddy starts like force feeding her, I guess.
That was kind of a weird scene.
Yeah, until she like kind of just puffs up and explodes, kind of. It was, I would say, like the actual like that stuff was kind of just weird, but I did think the whole scene was pretty creepy and just like strange and surreal with the people at the table kind of not reacting, and her mom, at least in the dream, being like, sort of Freddy playing with that expectation that her mom has for Greta. And so, like, even though I think the kill itself was just kind of strange, I think the scene helped bolster that one.
Yeah. For number 2, Dan's death, I really enjoyed as well.
Yeah, this one was awesome.
I mean, he gets in his car, and he's driving, and then Freddy just appears and starts pouring the champagne all over himself and melting, and just all these really cool effects. But the best part is where he kind of wakes up from the sequence, and he's all damaged, like he's all bloody and scraped up, and then he panics, he runs outside, he can't get into his car again because it's locked for some reason. He sees his motorcycle with the key in it, and he, in his infinite wisdom, decides to get on this motorcycle.
This bright ass red motorcycle, yeah,
bright ass red, 80 down the highway, and this is the coolest part where the motorcycle becomes Freddy, becomes him.
It like takes over his body.
The effect is amazing. I mean, the prosthetics. I mean,
Yeah,
I
like
could
all
talk about this.
there are wires coming out of the handles and on where his feet are, and they're all like coming into his arms, and Freddy's face is like in the motorcycle and pumping gas into him till he just becomes this weird body horror amalgam of motorcycle and man. It was just, yeah, like you said,
Yeah,
the prosthetics were really sold it in just how strange and surreal it looked. Um, and then, of course, it turns out he's actually still in his original car, driving like 90 into a truck of some kind. Um, but the actual act of seeing him in the dream world get morphed into a motorcycle man was really something.
when the movie started off that strong,
Yeah, yeah.
I just
When that's the
you
first
know,
death is motorcycle man, like you know you're in for a good time.
yeah,
But then yeah, like you said before, the first by far was Mark, who like exactly like the Take on Me sketch or Take on Me music video gets sucked into his comic book, and then yeah, he takes on the role of his character that he draws, shoots Freddy, kind of thinks he beats him, and then Freddy gets up, calls himself Super Freddy, and turns him into yeah this sort of flat comic book style piece of paper drawing, and just chops him up, drains the color out of him, and then yeah, literally the color sort of spills out like paint from the bottom, and it's just so cool. Like it was so good looking. Maybe one of my favorite scenes in a movie I've watched in a long time.
beautiful visually. They even set it up well throughout the entire movie. It was kind of foreshadowed that it was going to be something like this, but nothing could prepare me for how cool it was going to look. I truly implore any of our listeners to look this up and watch it. I mean,
It was a great scene.
maybe the best scene I've seen in any of these movies so far.
Now I will say though, Mark is an idiot for how
Yes.
he died.
Oh yes,
Alice
yeah.
goes to sleep. She's like, "Listen, I gotta confront Freddy. I gotta find Amanda. Just stay up and like watch me, so that we're safe." And this idiot decides rather than drinking a coffee, maybe jogging around his room or something, he starts by reading a book called Christian Mythology, then lays down on the floor and starts reading comic books, and then of course falls asleep like an idiot. Like what? What did you think was gonna happen, dude? You're reading books at like super early in the morning, and you need to stay awake.
Laying on the floor, the lighting is kind of dim. He should have really. There are a million things he could have done better.
Ate a coffee. Maybe he's got a sensitive stomach. Though honestly,
I
that
can
probably
see
would
those
have helped him in a way. All right, so all said and done, what would you say your score on this one is personally? Your letter grade here.
Okay, so it's kind of interesting that for the last one, I think I rated it a 3, maybe for as a film, and I gave it like a 9.
Mm-hmm.
But I actually would give this one maybe a 6.5 or a 7 as a film. Again, the cinematography was just great. The effects were amazing. The plot was garbage. The plot was garbage. Really dragged it down, but everything else was just amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I think you kind of have it nailed on the head. I honestly might even rank it higher than that, to be honest. Just like, listen, I think at this point we just know these aren't like great movies in terms of like cinema, right? Like, and I'm not expecting that, so I don't even really think that's a consideration. It's just like, did I enjoy this? Like, yes, this was really fun to watch and pretty easily like an 8, an 8.5. Like, I think
I give it a 9 for something I enjoyed. Honestly, I would just give it a 9. It makes me regret giving the other one a 9 because I enjoyed this a lot more. But I don't know if I can give it a 10 because the plot was just not that good.
Yeah, it's hard to give something a 10 even when you enjoy it. Like, I still think I preferred New Nightmare more, just in that
Crazy to me. That movie dragged on too long, I think.
I think it
about this
did,
more.
but like considering it was 2 hours, I still think it felt pretty fast, and I just enjoyed how bizarre the whole idea of like that it was set in the real world in which Nightmare on Elm Street are still movies. I just enjoyed the kind of like meta side of that. But this movie was right up there. I mean, it was just a blast to watch.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely, I would say less intense. Like, if you're wanting like an easy watch, this is definitely it. It goes faster. It's definitely more fun, I would say, because New Nightmare was definitely a little surreal and like could get darker and weirder, I think. whereas this was just a fun time.
Yeah, I think unfortunately we're gonna start enjoying these movies less and less. I think as they get closer to the first one, where I'm assuming it'll still have a lot of camp, but I think it'll lose some of the charm. I think that it kind of gained by
where it's
getting
just
to take these sort of
horrifying.
weird risks. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, the first one, which is like renowned as like this horror classic, is probably going to end up being our least favorite. I feel fairly confident.
Which is unfortunate.
Yeah.
Unfortunate.
But thank you, Grayson, for joining me yet again. We will be back sooner this time, so thank you to listening and hearing us just ramble about Nightmare on Elm Street 5 this time. And so next time, join us as we, for real, seriously, for real this time, jump forward now, not back, to the year, 1991, I believe?
Yes.
For the final Nightmare on Elm Street 6.
Time to die, you scar-faced limp dick!